This is the Dollemore Daily, and I'm Jesse Dollemore.
Hey, everybody. So listen, with all of the health crisis issues that are going on right now, we'll leave it at that because YouTube is demonetizing everything. They're going crazy. So I'm not even going to mention it. Won't even use the word. But because of it, a lot of news is falling through the cracks. A lot of stories that would otherwise be dominating the headlines is just not getting talked about. One of these stories is the fact that Mitch McConnell is apparently going around to federal judges who are of the age of possible retirement. Federal judges have a lifetime appointment. And he's going to them to try to get them to resign now in order that Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump and a guy named Leonard Leo can force through a bunch of radical, nutter butter, conservative religious judges. This is a problem. I'm going to read from the New York Times. Senator Mitch McConnell, Republican of Kentucky, who has used his position as majority leader to build a judicial confirmation juggernaut for President Trump over the past 3 years, has been personally reaching out to judges to sound them out on their plans and assure them that they would have a worthy successor if they gave up their seats soon, according to multiple people with knowledge of his actions. It was not known how many judges were contacted or which of them Mr. McConnell had spoken to directly. One of his Republican colleagues said others had also initiated outreach in an effort to heighten awareness among judges nominated by Presidents Ronald Reagan, George Bush, and George W. Bush that making the change now would be advantageous. And we're talking about a lot of judges here. Not 3 or 4 or 5 or a dozen or 2 dozen. According to the article, more than 90 judges nominated by the 3 previous Republican presidents are either now eligible or will become eligible this year to take what is known as senior status, a form of semi-retirement that enables their slots to be filled even though they can still hear cases, hire clerks, and receive full pay. The situation right now with our federal courts, and I'm not even talking about the Supreme Court, that's a whole separate issue that is in a dire strait right now. But the federal courts right now have been packed with these extremists, Federalist Society nutter butters by Mitch McConnell, Leonard Leo, and their Lord and Savior Donald Trump. Let me give you an idea of just how many vacancies Donald Trump walked into because of Mitch McConnell's obstructionist attitude and actions toward Barack Obama. First, Barack Obama walked into 54 judicial vacancies. I believe that's the number. 54. Ronald Reagan, for instance, had like 35 judicial vacancies when he walked in to office. Donald Trump walked into 107 vacancies on the federal bench because of the fact that Barack Obama got very few people through because of Mitch McConnell, who is now furthering his plan to pack the federal court with these extremists. People, for instance, we'll talk about Leonard Leo. Leonard Leo, let me read a quote from Leonard Leo about Mitch McConnell. Leonard Leo is the Federalist Society Executive Vice President, and he is an ultra-conservative, right-wing, extremist Catholic type. He has like 7 or 8 kids. He said of Mitch McConnell that he was the most consequential majority leader, certainly in modern history. And he is working in tandem with Mitch McConnell to change the face and shape and ideology of our federal courts. Now, the Federalist Society is an extremist judicial organization that had, 1/3 of our Supreme Court now, with Gorsuch and Alito and Kavanaugh, 1/3 of our Supreme Court are members of the Federalist Society. Michael Avery, who is the president of the board of the National Police Accountability Project and co-author of a book called The Federalist Society, How Conservatives Took the Law Back from Liberals, he said this of the Federalist Society. In general, they promote these kinds of ideas. They are in favor of small government as opposed to big government. They opposed most government regulation of business and property. Their core value is private property and the ability of a private property owner to do what he or she wants with their private property. Now, that may seem benign. That may seem like pure liberty in your mind. But that goes to whether you own a cafe and you want to allow only white people to eat there. If you want to discriminate against people of color or gays or whomever, it's your private property and you should be able to do with it as you please. That's the kind of attitudes they believe. Let me continue the quote. They are strong believers in American exceptionalism and believe the U.S. has a special role to play in the world and that people in the U.S. are somehow a special kind of people. This American exceptionalism where we want to export our type and our flavor of democracy all over the world, this is what has led us down the path with the Iraq War and our 21-year war in Afghanistan. Continuing the quote. They would rather have things done by the state than federal government, and they are strong on religious freedom, but religious freedom of a sometimes extreme nature, arguing, for example, that religion is an excuse for not complying with anti-discrimination laws. That is the Federalist Society. The bulk of the members believe this way. 3 members of our Supreme Court believe this way. This is the kind of ideology that Mitch McConnell, Leonard Leo, and Donald Trump are trying to jam down the throats of America, reshaping our judiciary for generations to come. And this is not being talked about right now because of our current situation. Now, reading that part of the quote, let me go back to it, that sometimes in extreme nature, their religious conservatism, arguing, for example, that religion is an excuse for not complying with anti-discrimination laws. Let me explain just how prevalent and how dangerous this attitude is. More than 24 of Donald Trump's judicial nominees, while sitting for confirmation before the Senate, refused to answer whether or not the case Brown versus Board of Education was argued or decided correctly. That's an easy answer. That is an easy question to answer. Whether or not Brown v. Board, the landmark Supreme Court case that desegregated American schools, or on its face is what it was supposed to have done. Desegregation didn't happen until years later. In fact, here's an example of what I'm talking about. This is Wendy Vitter, who now is a federal judge sitting in a district court in Louisiana. Watch her exchange during her confirmation when asked a basic question about whether or not Brown v. Board was decided correctly.
Do you believe that Brown versus Board of Education was correctly decided?
Senator, I don't mean to be coy, but I think I get into a difficult area when I start commenting on Supreme Court decisions, which are correctly decided and which I may disagree with. Again, my personal political or religious views I would set aside. That is Supreme Court precedent. It is binding. If I were honored to be confirmed, I would be bound by it, and of course I would uphold it.
Do you believe it was correctly decided?
And again, I will respectfully not comment on what could be my boss's ruling, the Supreme Court. I would be bound by it. And if I start commenting on I agree with this case or don't agree with this case, I think we get into a slippery slope.
It's not hard. In fact, it's quite easy that the values that we aspire to here in this country, the things we talk about so fervently, equality, that is what that's represented by. And she refused to answer it. And more than 24 of Trump's nominees have refused to answer that same question. Almost all of which have been nominated to the court. And now Mitch McConnell is making the rounds to try to get retiring or nearly retiring judges to quit so they can fill their seat with a much younger, similarly ideologically aligned nominee. Let me read what Christine Lucius, the Executive Vice President for Policy and Governmental Affairs for the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, said about Brown v. Board. Brown v. Board was about so much more than ending legal segregation in schools. It overturned laws that created a racial caste system to oppress and dehumanize African Americans. It opened the doors to allow for African Americans to integrate into all facets of American life. Judges who are unwilling to clearly affirm that Brown v. Board was correctly decided are putting all of this at stake, sending a dangerous signal to all Americans that Brown could someday be overturned and that our nation could return to the disgraceful days of racial segregation. All judicial nominees must endorse this essential principle of racial equality. How can we make things better for African Americans today in this country if a vast swath of our judiciary won't even commit to the progress that's already been made, to the blood that's already been shed for that progress? This is dangerous. This needs to be talked about more. And it is a shame, for many reasons, that we're going through what we're going through, that cannot be named because of demonetization, because this needs more eyes. This needs attention. The reshaping of our judiciary, not just the Supreme Court, but the federal bench, will be a generational change. That they'll change it now and it'll ripple out across generations. Packing the court with people who won't even say with their stupid mouths that Brown v. Board was correctly decided. Which ultimately is saying, maybe schools shouldn't be integrated. Maybe blacks are separate but equal. That is what they're saying. And Donald Trump clearly is a racist, radical white supremacist. Mitch McConnell, Leo Leonard, the vast majority of the Federalist Society. This is what we're going to get. This is why voting is so important. This is why in November, whether it's Bernie, which it doesn't look like it's going to be, or Biden, you vote. You vote to oust Donald Trump. So this is not even an option. We could win the Senate, we could win the White House, and all of this goes away. then we can have moderate, liberal, normal thinking judges who don't have a problem saying that yes, schools should be integrated. No, our country should not be segregated. There is no such thing as separate but equal. It's equal. There's equality and equity. There's value in every single human life. Anyway, share this video. Get this out to your social network. If you're still here with me after this time, I believe this is critically important, especially right now when there's so many other things that are on people's radar. The other thing, I would love to hear from you. I have a new email address, daily@dollemore.com and 714-576-4054. You can call, leave me a voice memo, voicemail. You can also email a voice memo from your smartphone and send it to that email address, daily@dollemore.com. Fighting a cough here. The other thing is, if you find value in what I do, I would encourage you to consider becoming a channel member here on YouTube. The next couple months and maybe longer are going to be tough because everything I do is being scrutinized by YouTube. And if I could just get 1 or 2% of my audience as a whole to come on as a channel member, it would completely extricate me from the difficulties that YouTube poses relative to monetization and other capricious and arbitrary policies that they like to change from day to day, from hour to hour. So please click that join button. Thank you very much. I love you guys, and I'll see you next time.